Ready to level up your leadership? This is the Growth Project. Hello and welcome back to the Growth Project. Today, I'm talking about young workers again. Last episode, you might recall that I spoke about young workers in the context of what employers can do to better support young workers and to really foster the growth and development of young workers, and some things that I believe that employers could be doing better. Today, this time, I am flipping the coin on this and I'm looking at the same topic but from the opposite perspective. I am focusing on how young workers can be better employees and why it should be important to you as a young worker. The first thing I would like to do, though, is make some acknowledgements. This is not an attack. Believe me, I understand that young workers today face significant challenges in life, like the cost of living, what we discovered in the previous episode about young workers, generally speaking, feeling under-supported, and that the data really supports that, and the culture shock of entering the workplace, especially if you've just come out of school or you've only ever been involved in easier part-time work, and how jarring that can be to step into a workplace surrounded by adults and all of the change that comes with that. That can be really intimidating. And like we said, there are some workplaces that don't treat their young workers as well as they should, and they don't support them as well as they should. So firstly, let's acknowledge that. And today, though, however, I'm going to talk about some topics and highlight the importance of considering why you should be a good employee and the benefits that brings to you both in the workplace and your personal life. So why don't we start with the question of why you should invest in yourself. And when I say invest in yourself, I mean going above and beyond your workplace activities to better position yourself for your career. So let's start with having a look at the difference between competence and capability. So there are lots of different opinions, and we could gather 50 people in a room and have 20 different opinions on what these words mean. I'll give you my interpretation. So when we determine that someone can perform a particular task to a certain standard, we deem that as competent. That's competency at play. But capability is where we start to learn different dimensions of that competency and applying those skills and that knowledge in different contexts. And it might look, as an example, for like having the ability to pivot to 5 different types of backup plans when things don't go well. If we don't have that level of capability that usually comes from experience with problem solving, then we can hit a brick wall when it comes to unexpected issues on the job. So competency is different from capability. That's going to become an important part of one of my arguments soon, or right now, in fact, because I'm going to point out something that some may see as controversial, but bear with me. So I would really question whether young workers, or any worker for that matter, who might be less experienced in a particular line of work than others, whether the mindset that I hear very, very often directly from people is that there is a sense of entitlement to higher wages because it should be the same for everybody who has the same category of job role. So I would call into question the entitlement to higher wages or salaries until you have built reliable skills and capability that you can offer your employer. Until you achieve a certain level of skill and reliable capability, your employer typically needs to support and supplement that with other resources. whether it's more time for the work that you do or allocating other resources to support you while you build your capability. So I would question whether it's a fair expectation to expect higher salaries until you have built those reliable skills and capabilities. I'll give you an example. If you went to a mechanic who charged by the hour and it was a really expensive hourly rate, or as expensive as another mechanic you've been to in the past who was really capable and skilled. So you are paying the same amount for this other mechanic, but this time they needed your help to figure out what the problem is with your car, and they needed your help to do the work. Would you question the hourly rate? And I think if you're honest with yourself, you would say yes, that you would question the hourly rate, because you would be feeling like you provided more resources. The mechanic was charging that hourly rate because presumably they possessed that higher level of skill and capability as the previous mechanic and wouldn't have needed your assistance and your guidance. So you would question whether it was right to be charged that hourly rate. So I would challenge you to point out the difference between those two scenarios. Then the other thing to keep in mind, I think, is the importance of committing to development and training, and in particular as well, actually, for apprentices. Whether you're aware, you might not be aware of this, or if you are, you might have been aware of it, or you may have forgotten, or maybe you aren't aware of it. But when you sign an apprenticeship contract, that's a contract between three parties. That is a contract between yourself, your employer, and the training organisation who's providing the off-the-job training. And each of those parties has obligations under that contract. The training organisation has the obligation to provide the adequate training and supervision of your formal learning, and to ensure that you have access to adequate supervision in the workplace, and to make sure that you're learning the relevant skills and that the information's current and all of those kinds of things, and that they're collaborating with yourself and the employer. The employer has the obligation of making sure that you're safe at work, that you're given lots of opportunities to learn, and that you're adequately supervised, and lots of also opportunities to practice the skills that you're learning. And you have the obligation to attend your training, to actively practice and participate in the training programs and the coaching and mentoring that you receive on the job. And to name those would be the high level items for you. So what the requirement is for you to invest in your learning and take ownership of your learning, and not waiting for things to happen for you. So, for example, if you felt that you weren't learning a particular task well enough because you weren't given enough opportunities to practice, you have an obligation to speak up, to consult with your employer, chat to them about those concerns and say, I'm worried that I'm not progressing enough in this area. So what can we do? How can I get more practice? How can I get more exposure? That's on you as well. You shouldn't be waiting for that to come your way. All right. So, but if you're not an apprentice, I would argue that it's important to take the same approach anyway for your own development, because that does have benefits for you in the future and your career trajectory, which we'll get to a bit later. So I would argue that that's worth putting even your own time into. Why would you limit your learning to the time that you're on the clock at work? You're trying to position yourself for a fruitful career. So why would you limit yourself to developing your skills and knowledge only within set hours of the day? I've never really understood that mindset, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily wrong, but I think you can better position yourself and your career by putting yourself in that mindset early. That brings me to talking about the benefits of building positive and effective workplace relationships with the people that are mentoring and coaching you and your colleagues and other young workers. So one of the most important things to do as a young worker or someone who's learning a trade or something like that is to keep an open mind to feedback. Ironically, it's also one of the most difficult things to do, especially as a young person who still has a developing brain. It can be incredibly challenging to overcome the emotion that comes with receiving critical feedback. So, unfortunately, the bad news for you is that the only way to become more comfortable with receiving criticism or critical feedback is to practice receiving it. So what I always recommend is to become more proficient, ask for feedback more often. There's a couple of reasons. One, obviously, because it's the only way you can practice receiving feedback productively. But the more often you ask for feedback, if there is any criticism, it's going to come to you in smaller chunks, in more palatable doses, and those pills will be easier to swallow, easier to process, and as you grow, you will have more resilience to lean on and accept heavier criticism. And this is going to put you into a growth mindset. And that is invaluable for the future of your career, but also for your personal growth outside of work as well. When you are given critical feedback, there is some brain functions that are at play that have the potential to derail those conversations. And I've done episodes previously around the amygdala, having difficult conversations. You should go back and listen over those, because in those I'll give tips on how you can manage your emotional responses during these conversations to make sure that they are as productive as possible. So go back over some of those and have a listen about what those things are. So they'll be earlier in my episodes, like episode number 5, keeping your cool during conflict is a good one in particular for that. So yeah, please go back over that and there was another one actually using I statements. Was episode 9, I think. I did give an episode around feedback. There might be some useful points on that as well. I believe it was episode 12. So please, that would be worth your while. Now, so like I said, when you do seek out feedback often, it is a more palatable way to practice your feedback receiving skills. Now, the benefit of being an apprentice in particular is that you should have access to some highly skilled and experienced mentors and coaches. So, how do you get the most out of those opportunities? The first thing you should do is focus some energy on building a rapport with these people. And there are multiple benefits for that. Number one, it makes your work days more enjoyable. That's a big plus in and of itself. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, when you demonstrate gratitude, respect towards the people that are imparting their expertise with you, that is a way of thanking them for their effort, and it's a loop as well. I guess that's part of the cycle of developing tradespeople. I guess that we want to give our mentors and coaches reason and to want to coach and mentor, because it is harder than you might think to coach and mentor a young worker. So paying respect in that way is something that I think is just a nice thing to do, but it also will help put them in a better mindset to provide you with coaching. You'll find that you will help them build resilience and motivation to build resilience for when times might be frustrating, when perhaps you might not be getting something and they need to put some more intensive effort into the coaching. It pays to have that relationship foundation there for those times. Do you know what too? When I've sat back and watched apprentices in their learning journey, there have been a few that I've seen doing something very interesting and very impactful, and that is journaling and note-taking. So there was a particular apprentice that I've worked with in recent times actually who was incredibly disciplined in taking notes on what they were learning during their training and during their on-the-job work activities. And those notes would involve taking photos, drawing sketches, and just writing notes on things that they were learning and how they were interpreting new information and all those kinds of things. And that I actually spoke to this person and asked about that and how they found it beneficial and why they did that. And they said, well, look, for me, it's just I find it useful to read back over them when I'm preparing for things like assessments and or if I've got those kinds of jobs coming up in my work schedule, I feel better prepared for them. But this person basically described that they felt that they had a duty while they were given that they were very aware of what their employer had invested into them. This person thought that it was a good way to demonstrate the respect pay the respect of, acknowledging the investment that has been made and honouring that by doing everything within their power to absorb that information and come out of the apprenticeship as the most highly skilled young worker that they could be. And that was very admirable. And I've got a lot of faith that this particular person is going places in that industry because the commitment they showed to their learning has put them in a very strong position to work towards and excel towards future opportunities now that they're a qualified tradesperson. The other thing that is critically important for building a positive working relationship with your coach or your mentor is for situations where you might not feel safe for a particular work task. And this can be a common scenario in some industries. And I can relate to this myself. If you don't have a good rapport with your supervisor, your crew leader, your coach or mentor, it can be very intimidating to speak up when you don't feel safe. And in some cases, unfortunately, that results in apprentices or young workers becoming hurt on the job. And having that foundation that we spoke about, the rapport between the coach and the young worker, can be the difference between the young worker feeling more comfortable to speak up or not speaking up. So we all would always encourage coaches and mentors to invest in that relationship building as well, but it does take both parties to do that. So you need to spend some effort on that. Whilst you might not always see eye to eye, you might not agree on things. To some extent, you might not even get along with the person that well. That doesn't mean that you can't work on building a solid working relationship. Now, let's talk about the expectations and needs of the employer, because this is an important thing for you to think about. Coming back to, if we look back to the mechanic story that I told just earlier, or the question I posed, employers have the right to expect productivity, just like you would expect value for money when you paid a mechanic or an electrician or anybody for anything in your personal life. So let's just put those kinds of scenarios side by side. You are providing a service to your employer, just like your mechanic is providing a service to you. So it is fair for the employer to expect that you are dedicated to your work and that you are committed to improving your work and your performance, and for making sure that they're getting value for their investment in you. So that's an important thing to have in mind at the base of this. When you have downtime, for example, or when maybe something gets damaged, perhaps because we haven't looked after it very well, or we've lost a piece of equipment, or where we decide not to turn up to a training program that we've been booked into, this all comes at a significant cost to your employer. And some people would say, and some people have said to me, that's not my concern. My employer it's a big enough company that this doesn't matter. And I can't disagree with that statement anymore. It always matters, because you might be one of 100 people in your workplace that have the same attitude. And when your employer has to budget for these kinds of issues, lack of efficiency, damages, downtime, increased training costs, replacing equipment and repairs and all of those sorts of things, they have to then budget for that. And that becomes money that is no longer available for things like further development. Dare I say it, even pay increases, right? Let's look at the bigger picture here. So I would put under that category of downtime the elephant in the room. Let's talk about it. The mobile phones in the workplace. I would have to say that by far, this is the number one gripe that I hear from employers of all sizes, is that the frustration of seeing people wasting time many times a day scrolling on their phone. So let's talk about it. Again, I think it comes under the category of fair expectations, like I said before. But when we are seeing people spending a significant amount of time on their phone in the workplace, for example, that can be frustrating to an employer, because they might be thinking, well, this is a great opportunity for you to do some maintenance on the equipment in your vehicles or on your trucks, or to do some informal learning and training, or to, if you're an apprentice, to do things like logbooking that often sometimes gets falls behind and things like that. So why wouldn't it be fair to expect, when you're paying for a service, this is the employer, why would it not be fair to expect that time could be better put to use? Now, I don't think that most employers are expecting that people won't touch their phone all day. I think there is a fair use policy here from my perspective. But I would be mindful of how that impacts your business. And if you ever have thought that it doesn't matter because I work for a big company, then I would encourage you to rethink that, because it does matter. It does have an impact. And not only that, we're going to get into the psychology of this a little later, but it also has a negative impact on your mindset that can put you at a disadvantage in your career and your life in general later. The reality is I work with owners of small to medium companies multiple times a week. I work with large employers multiple times a week. And I'm having these types of conversations frequently. And here's what they're telling me. They are telling me that they are willing to pay good money for people and for young people. But what they are telling me that they are not willing to pay good money for is for people to spend too much time on their phones, for people to turn up late, for people to knock off early, for people, I hear the word coasting a lot for people to coast and take it easy and work slowly. To see they're not willing to pay for lack of improvement in people's work performance. They're not willing to pay for people who aren't open to feedback and continuous improvement. They're not willing to pay good money for someone who they have to direct and supervise everything that they do. I'll bring back to the mechanic scenario earlier. And for people who aren't willing to make the most of any downtime that might come up. And if we're really open and honest with ourselves and we apply some critical thinking, I think those are hard things to disagree with. Again, if you think about it from the perspective of would you see it as fair if it was something you were spending money on and resources on? Because what you should remember is that ultimately what's good for your employer is also good for you. It's good for you in the sense that it can present you further opportunity. It can help the company perform better financially, which presents more opportunity for you also. So that is worth keeping in mind, folks. Let's talk about the psychology and the impact of these kinds of mindsets on life in general and the longer term career trajectory. So there is some research that suggests being a poor employee can have lasting negative effects on a person's psychology and affects both their self-concept and their long-term career trajectory. When you do make the effort to stretch past the minimum, you're not just meeting the expectations of your job, but you are also reshaping your own mind and you're setting yourself up for long-term success in every area of your life. Because when you push beyond what's comfortable or what's easy, you are creating habits that reinforce resilience and discipline and ambition. These are things that are going to place you well for advancement and open up more opportunities for you. Because whatever behaviors you display in the workplace and that you live by, don't just stay confined to your work day. They do spill over into your personal life, and it does influence how you approach your relationships, be it at work or personally, your goals, how you view yourself, how capable you view yourself as and how capable you are, and how motivated you are. And on the flip side of that, when you settle for doing the bare minimum, your brain internalizes that kind of behavior, and over time, it becomes your default mode of operation. What starts as a habit at work, as in just getting by or doing just enough, begins to bleed into how you handle everything. So you might start cutting corners in your personal life, avoiding challenges, or even losing interest in pursuing your passions and your hobbies, and that would be a real shame. This mindset can erode your self-confidence, and it can cause you to doubt your abilities and question your value, and this will ultimately limit your potential, both in the work sense and the personal sense. But the good news is that every person has the power and ability to change this or to prevent it. So every time that you choose to go a little further or identify that you've got some downtime and maximize that time in some productive way, whether it's going and doing some maintenance on something or helping someone else with something, with another task, or doing some learning, or just to give a little bit more than expected, what you're doing is you're building momentum, and you're teaching yourself that you are someone who takes pride in their work and that doesn't shy away from effort, and as someone who can rise to meet a challenge. And the ripple effect of this is profound. you'll find that you start approaching life in general with more energy and with more enthusiasm and confidence. And don't underestimate the power of feeling more confident about things, especially confidence in your work ability. So when you build a stronger sense of purpose and resilience, this will absolutely improve your career prospects, but it will also improve your relationships and it will accelerate your personal growth. Remember, effort breeds effort and success breeds success. The small decisions that you make today, whether it's at home or in the workplace, whether you're giving more or settling for less, these are the foundations that you're building for later. So stretching beyond the minimum isn't just about being a good employee. It's about cultivating a mindset that makes you stronger and more fulfilled in all aspects of your life. And I defy you to argue with that. So with that in mind, thank you for listening. Look after yourself, look after your teams, and I'll chat to you next time. There you have it, folks. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of The Growth Project. I'm really enjoying the interaction, so please keep the messages and emails coming through. Keep an eye out for our upcoming Frontline Leader Mindset workshops at entertrain.com.au. They're in Sydney and Melbourne. And of course, you can reach out to request a private customized workshop for your team. Again, that's entertrain.com.au. That's entertrain.com.au. What would really help us send our leadership insights far and wide is 5-star ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or even just share the show with your network, family, and friends. Until the next episode, look after yourself and look after your teams.